All right, Washington Commanders draft recap here. So, the team that was 2 wins away from winning it all last year, trying to improve. Only 5 picks, though, in this draft. So, let's talk about them. First, just to explain what you're looking at, the chart next to me, the first number is where the player was selected. You then have the player name, the player position, and where they were projected to be selected according to the consensus big board. So, let's just get into it. Only 5 picks, and that's right off the bat, my biggest critique of this draft. You always want to have more than 5 picks, right? You want to have, usually, I feel like at least 7, ideally more than 7 draft picks. So, you're going to have to make sure you nail some of these picks, essentially, because you don't have that many. But yeah, pick 29, Josh Conerly Jr., an offensive lineman. He's interesting. So someone who, there are some knocks on him. He does have some inconsistent hands, especially in run blocking. It isn't the strongest player in the world, so you do view him as kind of a pass protecting tackle. That's kind of really where he's at. Should add some, I think he should be, in theory, a guy who can play right or left tackle if need be. To me, he feels like a guy who can come in if there is an injury. But you do have Laramie Tunsil, who, again, hopefully will just play 1,000 snaps and be good. And you have Brandon Coleman and Andrew Wiley, both who neither one are great. And maybe the hope is that Conerly can play, better than them. But ultimately, since you have 2 of those guys, you don't need depth here. I think it's a long-term move. And listen, they're totally in position to make long-term moves. You have Jaden Daniels, who's one of the best assets in sports right now, because not only is he so good, but he's still on a rookie deal. So I think that's just what it is. They don't want to get rattled with injuries and have a bad situation where then Daniels can't get hurt. They want to make sure they protect him. I get it. You do wonder, though, with just 5 picks and still some holes on this roster, in my opinion, should they have maybe used that elsewhere is the question. Trey Amos is a pick I love. This is a great selection by Washington, projected to go 38th, and I thought he should have been higher than that because he's just a good football player. And sometimes teams overthink this, and you just need to draft good football players, and he is one of those. So I'm surprised he fell all the way to 61st, but for Washington, who I think they felt going into this year that they didn't need to go corner in the draft, like they have Marshawn Lattimore, who they're hoping can take a step forward because they would have cut him otherwise, would have saved a lot of money if they did, but they trust him. They're going to keep him. And then you still have, Jonathan Jones, Noah Igbenogany, and Mike Sanistrell, who, someone who I think is probably, they like more in the slot. In theory, now you can have Amos and Lattimore as outside, and that could give you a great starting 3 with some depth here. Again, corners don't always hit right away, but I like Amos. I think he's a good player. They then selected Jalen Lane, who is a bit of an interesting pick here, because he's a speed guy who cuts well, but I don't know if he cuts well enough to be a traditional, consistent running back or even a slot guy, if that's what they want to have him do. I do think he adds real value in special teams. I think that he could be a great kick returner and punt returner is what he could be really good at. Was great at that in college. I do think that's a big part of why they selected him. I'm not sure exactly, other than just as a burner, which maybe there's value there, but I'm not sure what else he's going to bring to this receiving core other than a guy who can maybe get past the defense down the field and keep the defense honest. And that might just be it. A burner who can also play special teams. Hey, there's value in that. And of course, there is the other thing of he could develop more than that. He could learn to, cut better, similar to how DK Metcalf did. Different levels of athleticism there, but still, at least if you get a guy who's an athlete, you can, maybe teach him more. We'll see how that works. They didn't have Kane Mandero here, who is a someone who at pick 205. What are you getting? I do think one thing that I like about him is he probably could play strong safety or linebacker. And I know we don't view those as very different positions, but for depth pieces, at least being able to check multiple different boxes as a depth player, that means you can be the third string safety and third string linebacker. So that does add some things here. He is definitely someone who he will miss tackles. That is a big issue with him. But 10 was all right in man coverage this past season. I do wonder if he is someone who is just a special teams guy. That's where he was projected to go. But at 205, and maybe they feel like he could. This is kind of where you either get depth players or special teams players. I think maybe they feel like he could do both of that, and he could be depth in multiple different positions. So, hey, if you check 3 different boxes, okay, that's worth 205. Finally, they went running back at 245, so we're really towards the end of the draft. Here, another guy who you just have to wonder if he's someone who's going to have to play special teams to get into the mix. So kind of interesting that their last 3 picks are all players who special teams is going to be a part of what they do. Shows where Washington's kind of placing their value a little bit. Although I think all 3 of these players can hopefully not just be special teams guys. For Jackery Krosky Marriott, someone who I think they hope can be a explosive enough running back to hopefully get just some carries if need be, but I do think special teams is really what they're looking at here. So ultimately, a bit of an odd draft. I do think that the Trey Amos pick is such a good pick. I'm still going to be very positive about this draft. I do wonder if there was maybe ways to maximize what they did a little bit more. I know a lot of people wanted to see them get an edge rusher in this draft. They ultimately are okay with who they currently have. I wouldn't have hated to see them in a deep edge class spend one of these picks on an edge here, but ultimately that's not what they end up doing, and they should have a much better special teams unit, which, hey, that still matters. So, yeah, should be an interesting season next year. But those are kind of my thoughts on what Washington did. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.